The topics and opinions expressed on the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4WN Radio.
This is Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. Do you want to live a more fulfilling life? Do you want to live your legacy and achieve your personal, professional, and financial goals? Well, coming up on Divya Parekh's Beyond Confidence, you will hear real stories of leaders, entrepreneurs, and achievers who have stepped into discomfort, shattered their status quo, and are living the life they want. You will learn how relationships are the key to achieving your aspirations and financial goals. Moving your career or business forward does not have to happen at the expense of your personal or family life, or vice versa. Learn more at www.divyaparekh.com, and you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. This is Beyond Confidence, and now here's your host, Divya Parekh.
Good morning, listeners. It is awesome to be here with you. And you know why? Because you are the life and blood of this show. Without you, the show would not be possible. And today we are just going to jump straight into our show. We have Dr. Josh with us. Welcome, Josh. How are you?
It is a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for having me on the show.
Oh, absolutely. You are doing some amazing things. So usually we start out from the youth or a childhood memory or a person who left a positive mark on you. Can you share with us any memories that you might have or any people's impact that impacted your life?
You know, for me, my teachers and obviously my parents and family just had such an integral role, me growing up. I'm a huge history buff. So, I always looked up to military members and teachers. A lot of my teachers were in that age group had served in Vietnam, were like Vietnam veterans. So Mr. Brown, Mr. Hawk, Mr. Reno, a lot of those teachers from high school had a lot to do with me growing up the way I am. And of course, my parents, my dad, my mom and stepmom. So I've had a lot of people. I've kind of coined that term, be the weight behind the spear. And I've had a lot of people that have been the weight behind my spear to, lead me to where I am as a leader right now.
Mm. Yeah, that's a saying that's not very common. So tell us a little bit more about that.
So when you talk about, weight behind the spear,
Mm-hmm.
I think people have heard the term tip of the spear before,
Mm-hmm.
and you'll
Mm-hmm.
hear that with some of our, special operators, special forces. I worked as a medical director for pararescue, like the PJs, some of the combat search and rescue teams, and just amazing individuals. Like these guys are jumping out of helicopters, they're kicking down doors, they're people that are members of the teams that take down guys like bin Laden. And I don't do that. I don't take lives. I save lives. I'm a physician, and I can be but I realize that I can still be the weight behind that spear. Every single hero out there, you talk about teachers and coaches and athletes, special forces operators. They all have somebody in their life that gave them the confidence to do what they do. Teachers, coaches, volunteers, mentors, and family. Those things are critically important. And I want people to focus on their roles as those people being the weight behind the spear for our heroes in this country. And the more that we focus on that, the more we can develop leadership skills in our youth and the next generation of Americans. We gotta hand this torch over, right?
Absolutely. And I want to thank you for your services because, as you mentioned, that you didn't jump off the helicopters and all that. But the way I see it is that we as human beings, we are a collective force of nature. You can't do anything alone. I mean, even if, while we're sitting over here, just think about the technology or the sweatshirt or like the mic, anything that is in use by us or anyone. Hundreds and hundreds of hands have touched it. Even if we talk about a single piece of that mic in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
And what is happening over there? Like, somebody created different parts in different industries. I don't know which factories, and then somebody brought it together, assembled it, somebody shipped it, somebody delivered it, or it was in a store, and so many hands touch it. So it's important to realize that, yes, it's important to have that individual expression and at the same time recognize that we are a part of collective. So
You
thank you
know,
for your services.
oh, absolutely. Thank you. I mean, you can say the same thing for every person. Every individual is literally a collection of all the people around them, all those like
Mm-hmm.
family, friends. We already talked teachers, coaches, physicians, first responders. You know, everyone is a collection of those things, and that's what makes you who you are. So every single person matters. They discount their role. Those decisions that you make every single day make a difference to somebody, whether you realize it or not. And take pride in that and be part of your community. I want people to engage their communities, get out there and volunteer, coach. There's lots of opportunities out there.
Mm-hmm. So tell us what made you decide to go in the military service and be part of that, because I'm assuming that it was very high pressure and stressful.
Yeah, I served in Iraq in 2007. I did one air assault, and it was the scariest thing I have ever done.
Mm.
But the reasons that I serve, it's the men and women that served before me. So I was born in the 70s. I was born in 1977, and I've lived in the shadow of the Vietnam War my entire life. So there
Mhm.
was a whole um, a whole group of Americans that served in a war. I'm such a huge military history buff that I just always looked up to those men and women. And when it came my time to serve, I joined before 9/11. So I initially joined the Army National Guard to get out there and do some medical mission work. So it was billed. The recruiter tells me, hey, we do all these medical mission trips in Honduras and Belize and Guatemala, all this stuff in Central America. We really need your medical expertise. So when I got to medical school, I took a direct commission. That was in 2000, and then we all would know what happened in September of 2001. 9/11 kicked
Oh,
off,
yeah.
and so we've been at war my entire career now, essentially. And
Hmm.
it's created a lot of opportunities, but I've seen a lot of death and destruction as well, and it really kind of shapes who you are and why what you do matters. So I kind of wake up literally every single morning just thinking about the men and women that didn't make it through Iraq. I literally carry some body bags on medevac helicopters, and just I take a lot of pride in that. But I try to live every day for the men and women that can't.
Yeah, and it's you're absolutely right. And it gets to you every single time.
Yeah, sure.
And it's
But
important
yeah,
that,
life is special, and I have a full
yes,
appreciation of that.
absolutely. And how did you transition out from there? And thank you
Yeah,
for having the heart
yeah,
to serve. And then
yeah.
tell us about your transition from there into the ER.
So and I'm an emergency physician as well. So I was I was a physician in the military as well. So I still do both. I'm still an emergency doctor, and I command right now. After my time in Iraq, I switched to the Air Force. After that, I was prior Army. So I commanded Andrews Air Force Base up in Washington D.C. for a squadron. And that transition coming home, I think for a lot of veterans is very difficult. So
Hmm.
when you get into a combat zone and things become life and death, and you see a lot of death and destruction, it's very easy to get into a battle mindset because
Hmm.
people have this natural uh, survival mode. Like it's like kill or be killed, and you snap into that very, very quickly. Coming
Hmm.
back out of that is extremely hard. So I really struggled when I came back to the U.S. after my time in Iraq, and jumped right back into the emergency department probably in less than 2 weeks from getting back. And I clearly was not ready. I definitely struggled, and met my wife now, Elsa, and we actually moved to New Zealand for almost a year after I returned. And after we had met, I'd been home for probably a year or so, and it really helped me get my head straight. And I played soccer at Rotorua United and worked in a little emergency department at Rotorua, and then kind of got my my headspace into a better place. And I thank my wife for that. She has everything to do with that.
Mm. So you mentioned about death and destruction, and there's so many people. It's not just our veterans coming out of that who are facing it is day to day, and it could be that your house is wiped off, like as we have seen in Western
Oh,
North Carolina, we have seen with Helene, we have seen with
well, in
hurricanes in Florida, and
in
now ending
California right
fires.
now, like, oof, just so much destruction. It's
Right.
definitely hard. I mean,
So
everyone has something to deal with, you know?
yeah, so when people are going through their daily lives, right? This is something so unexpected. Like they don't expect, like, okay, I've got a beautiful house where I've put my memories into it, and next day it is gone. How can people deal? And we can come back to we'll revisit the physical importance and all of that, but the mental importance, like having that mental well-being is so critical. How can people hold it together during these tough times?
You know, focusing on that weight behind your spear. Like
Mm-hmm.
what carries you? Who do you look up to? Like who did you learn from? I mean, your family, your friends, you've got some great coworkers, volunteer organizations. There's just your, prior teachers, coaches, like everyone has something to lean on. Have a good team around you. That's your team. Like the people that you grew up with, your friends, your family, you know, I think most people hold that in pretty high regards, and lean on those people. They're there for you. Because at the end of the day, nobody really cares how much money you make or what kind of car you drive or what kind of house you're in. Nobody really cares about that stuff when it comes down to like living and dying. And
Right.
so, lean on those people around you. That's what they're there for. Everybody
Absolutely.
has a breaking point. So when you talk like mental health issues and mental health
Mhm.
struggles, as an emergency doctor, I see that. So I see anxiety, depression, and suicide, and it rips my heart out every time. So you find those people around you that can help you through those very dark moments.
Mhm. Kind of going back to what you had mentioned earlier, Dr. Josh, you mentioned that you went through that tough time and you leaned on your wife. So can you share us a few things that you did during that time that helped you not only come out of it, as well as continue helping others?
So, the VA, the Veterans Health
Hmm.
Administration, has some great resources for veterans, the PTSD and anxiety, depression. We have, you'll see a lot of suicides in military, men and women that have served, and, trying to get some visibility on that as best you can and talk about it. Don't hide it. Everybody has a breaking point, even
Mhm.
special forces operators. These guys are the strongest, the fastest, the smartest, and the most mentally tough people on planet Earth. And they still have suicides in that group. So everybody has a breaking point. Realize that it's okay to talk about mental health. It's not something to be ashamed of. Like everybody at some point in their life, in certain situations, will break. I mean, the death of a child or a spouse or, financial hardships. I mean, just everybody's got a different breaking point. So just talk about it and be open and honest.
Absolutely. And that's so important. And kind of moving towards, as you mentioned, that the special guys also have their breaking point.
Yeah.
So not only in the army, but talking about the businesses. And because just yesterday I was talking with one of my clients, and he is a sales VP, and he was talking about his team, like, how can I motivate them? And it's important that they focus on efforts and performance. And if they're not achieving it, then there's something wrong. And just the mandate that, like, this is mandatory, you gotta do that, that's going to discourage the employees. What would you say to, and fortunately, my client is very empathetic and amazing. So he is creating space for them that, how can I help you succeed? What obstacles you're facing? But with your experience, what would you tell business leaders? How can they create that space for anyone? I mean, and especially today's younger generation.
So certainly there's a lot of different things you can do, like as a business leader, as a military leader, having a solid team. Now,
Hmm.
that team it's trust. So they need to trust in their leadership, and the leadership needs to get to know their people, like as people. I mean, certainly there's targets, there's objectives that you have to hit to be a part of this team, and there's standards that you have to meet to be a part of that team. But everybody is different. So what motivates one person is not going to motivate the next person. And those are really the key skills of leadership, is knowing your people, what's going to motivate them. That pressure can be great. High pressure creates diamonds. And then there's some people that just don't do as well under that pressure, and kind of tend to wilt or break down. Everybody is different. So you have to know how to address those with each of your team members, what motivates them and what brings them down. But it all comes down to trust. If your team trusts you and they know that you care, they're gonna find a way to get to the objectives that you set. I set pretty lofty goals with my team at Andrews Air Force Base.
Mm-hmm.
And there's been members of that have not been able to meet some of those standards, and they're no longer part of that organization anymore. But they knew, and they trusted me, and they knew that I cared about them. So those are difficult decisions you have to make as a leader. But if they trust you, you'll get the results.
Yeah, no, that's very profound. So going back to what you shared just now, that it's a very high pressure job. And for some, that high pressure can create that adrenaline stream, which gives
Yeah.
them the high, and they
Mhm.
are all for it. So, as an individual, so we've talked from a perspective of a business leader. What about from an individual perspective? How can they recognize, what are they cut out for, and what pathways they can create for themselves?
So, and then you mentioned a little bit ago with just some of the younger generation as well, giving them ownership in your
Hmm.
organization as quickly as possible. Um, they there's a little bit of a different mindset in being raised on iPhones and iPads and being constantly entertained, and some resiliency issues. So the faster you can get people to buy in to your organization and know that they have ownership, being part of that team, not just a part, not just showing up and punching the clock, but realizing that what they do every day matters, and having that ownership, you'll get them to you'll get much better results, and they'll be much more successful.
Hmm. You're absolutely right on the mark about that. And so, what you're sharing with me is that the leader needs to build that trust. And when you're building that trust and creating that space, you're allowing not only in your squadron, but in the business team squadron, or whatever we want to call it, like in a pod or wherever it is. You're allowing them to step up and become the leaders, because they will be the next generation leading the next incoming force. And as I was reading just very recently, since I work on intergenerational communication, and I'm always talking about that and doing workshops, that a new generation has already begun.
Oh yeah,
Gen Z.
and
Gen Z
and
is
the,
booted out, and then starting from 2025. So it's important that we continue to build these people. And
it, and business leaders, whether you realize it or not, this generational difference, it is your problem, and the sooner you get involved now, the better the results are going to be down the road, because every single one of these individuals in however many years is coming to look for a job at your business, and realizing just the differences and the different makeup and expectations of that generation. You would still need them to be successful. So what worked for you 50 years ago or 20 years ago or even 10 years ago is not going to necessarily work. That complacency kills business. It stifles ideas. So you're going to have to find a way to be able to relate to this generation, and make sure that they're successful. It is a much different world. That new generation does not learn the same way or respond the same way as I do. as a guy born in the 70s. So but that's what a good leader will be able to do. You adapt and overcome.
Absolutely. Adaptability. That is such a key word. And what you mentioned was that newer generations, I mean, every generation learns differently. Now, that said, when we talk about the newer generation, so I have a lot of my clients, as I do the executive leadership coaching, so many of them tell me that I want to work for a company that is impacting the society or something that's doing meaningful, that when I'm coming at the end of the day, that I know that I've just not done my work for a paycheck, but I am able to impact others as well. And you always say that, you are serving out there in the community and you have done so much. So tell us a little bit more about how the companies, they don't have to be completely pro, but how can they get involved and start serving in their community?
Yeah. So that community engagement, I mean, not only does it give you better visibility for your business, I mean, just look at it. It's marketing, right? So get
Mm-hmm.
out there, go sponsor a little league team, or like coaching. Go coach some sports, soccer, t-ball, baseball, basketball. Find some youth leagues or your YMCA. Getting involved in volunteering in your church or your school. There's so many different ways for you to get involved, that not only are you helping build like the future of your business, because you're investing in these kids now so that they can have some of these leadership skills and resiliency skills, and you show that positive role model, as a business owner or community leader. They're going to get to you eventually. If you wait till they show up on your doorstep with an application, where everything's online now, but to try to address those things 18 years later, like, well, you're way behind the eight ball. So, and then if you think about that as more of a return on investment with just your people, and then it's marketing for your business. Like, put your name on the back of the shirt, right? So,
Oh,
yeah.
that's a perfect way, because I do recall, like, you mentioned that put your name on the back of the shirt. Cisco used to send out so many volunteers during the robotics competitions, because when I was there with my kids and all that, it was amazing. And they were not only getting to know these youngsters and forming that relationship. So, what a perfect way to do that. Put your name out there on the t-shirt, get the word out there. So, definitely a great way to do. And I know you mentioned that you have started a nonprofit organization. Can you share with us about that?
Yeah, thank you. So we've started a nonprofit organization, Weight Behind the Spear Foundation, and really taking some of the fundamentals of my book, Be the Weight Behind the Spear. And, living right here in North Carolina at the end of September, we had just horrific storms with Hurricane Helene, and it just destroyed some beautiful areas of Western North Carolina. And so the first thing we've done is worked on raising money and trying to get that community engagement and promote some volunteerism, but just raising funds for Western North Carolina. And we've had some success with doing that, and just putting the money where the mouth is, right? I mean, you write the book, and I want to make sure that I'm showing that example and living that. So it's gone very well.
Absolutely. So you mentioned about your book, Weight Behind the Spear. So tell us what got you inspired to write that book, and give us a few glimpses from it.
So the things that I saw in the emergency department,
Mm-hmm.
right after COVID, and then as an emergency commander, really, they still have me worried. So as an emergency doctor, the anxiety, the depression, the suicide in a generation of Americans where there's a 2 or 3 year span, we shut these kids out of their schools, we shut them out of their churches. They literally were not interacting with anyone else other than over iPads during
Yeah.
very critical years in their development. And you're seeing the results of that in the mental health crisis that we have. And it's much worse in that aged population. I mean, they missed out on their high school graduation. There was a class that literally missed out on some of their college graduations. I mean, wow, they just been cheated out of so much. And the mental toll on that, we're seeing that. And as a physician, that's what I deal with. And as a military commander, I have that same cohort of individuals, that same age group that I command. And you see lack of resiliency. The
Mm.
mental health issues are still very present. And I'm never one to just sit there and whine and complain about something. Like, what can we do about it? So, number one, you have to recognize that there's a problem. And then the book is my prescription on how I feel we need to fix that problem. So, be the weight behind the spear, get more people engaged in their community, um, just get people involved and just realize that what they do every day matters and just celebrate the best resource that we have in this country. That's people. I've said it over and over. Teachers, coaches, volunteers, mentors, family. That's so important. That's the best thing we have in this country. So let's celebrate it.
Yeah, people definitely. I mean, people make it or break it, regardless any organization there is. And you did say that there is a very prevalent issue of mental well-being that's going on in this Gen Z. So there are a lot of business leaders out there, and sometimes, they're scratching their heads on how to deal with it. So can you share with us a few strategies and steps that they could use in dealing, in recognizing and dealing with it?
I know as a business owner, so I owned a business in Texas, and just the individuals just not understanding the the repercussions of some of their decisions. So just trying to coach them up as best you can. Some of them will take the teaching, some won't. But I remember just one case of one of our secretary staff, young boy, 19 years old, and just very spontaneous. Something pops up, and she wants to go take off on this vacation across the country, and gives us less than 2 weeks notice that, hey, I'm just going to take off. I'm going to quit my job and go do this. And we try to sit down and just teach. And like, hey, listen, just trying to be a professional. Number one, at least if you can give us 2 weeks notice, right? Because we still have to fill your position, and just talk about the repercussions, what happens when you just bail on a job in a business like that, and the other people that have to suffer, or other people have to pick up your shifts now, and maybe they had to have childcare issues they have to deal with. And at the end of the day, she said, well, I'm out. 6 months later, she comes back. It's like, hey, can I have my job back? No, 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 you can't. You didn't give us 2 weeks notice. You weren't very professional, like the other people that had to pick up the slack when you left with just zero notice like that. It impacts other people. So just trying to just teach and coach and to think about other people, because when you've been raised in a bubble for 2 or 3 years where it was only about you and no interaction with other people, like literally your own personal actions almost had zero impact on anyone else on the planet because you were living in a house on an iPad. But those things that you do, they do impact other people. So trying to point out that and just teach and get them to plug back into society, it's a challenge at times, but very important.
Mm, some very powerful story and messages over there. So what I'm hearing is that if you're a business leader, it's important to setting those expectations, because so many times what happens is that working remotely, and now a lot of companies are mandating going back to work 5 days a week. So that'll remain to be seen, how the younger generation and even the older generation respond to that.
Yeah, you cannot build a team over Skype and Zoom and Microsoft Teams. You can't. You have to have some of that physical and personal interaction to build some chemistry. Because if your entire team is just built over looking at a screen, you're just not going to get that buy-in and that team culture. It's very, very difficult to create culture and make any changes in an organization just over an iPad and a screen. You have to have people in the office interacting. How was your day? Talk about their kids. I mean, we're all people. And until you can kind of get them together and build that culture, it's just not something you can do over video screens. You just can't.
No, you're absolutely right, because there's something to be said when you're in a room with other people, that energy is completely different. And yet there are still several companies who are fully remote. So do you have any tips for those people? Like, how could they build whatever culture they can over the Zoom or Skype?
Mhm. Well, you have to have some like in-person events or just some parties, great Christmas party. I mean, at least probably once a quarter, having some type of physical interaction. And you will notice the higher turnover rates in businesses that operate mostly just over video screens and remote workers. They will tend to jump from job to job because they're going to chase. If you pay them more money, they don't have the loyalty. They don't have that buy-in to your organization and really feel like as a real team as much when they're not there in person. So the more you can get them to interact with one another, having some events, workshops, those types of things, you got to find a way to get people together because it's hard to build that team.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's important to have that one-on-one connection, whether it is like offsites or whatever it is. Really, really important to get those people together and build that camaraderie. And that also helps with the mental health. So in dealing with the mental health, so many times people will turn their camera off during the Zoom meetings or the team meetings. And that connection it's almost like hiding behind the wall. So whatever
Oh,
you're
exactly.
sharing.
I
Yeah.
mean, so you're just taking it to the next level. Not only are you not there with any physical interaction, you just push a button, click your screen. Just I'll just shut off. Nobody has to see me cry. Nobody has to know that I'm, concerned or upset or anxious. I mean, you live in a small little bubble. It's not good mentally. It's not good.
Mhm. Absolutely. So if you were to pull together the wisdom nuggets from your book, like, in top two to three pieces of advice, what might that be?
First one is accountability. And
Mm-hmm.
that on several different, I mean, just with your interactions with people, with accountability for results in your own actions, but just like physical accountability is critically important. And then when I talked about, kind of nobody likes rules, right? But if you talk about standards, it's much different. So Coach K, legendary basketball coach at Duke University, when I was a professor there at Duke, he had a great lecture where he came into our residency program, and the biggest takeaway, I was in awe. It was 2 hours. It is literally the most incredible like leadership lecture, anything I've ever heard. Um, the big takeaway just being, just the team, organization, culture. It's about standards. Nobody likes the rules, but if you talk about standards and your team trusts you and like, hey, listen, you know, you're not meeting our standard as this team. And when you talk about it, just as standards instead of rules, like people really respond to that and they can understand that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And
You know,
anything else you'd like
yeah,
to share?
yeah, and empowering them to make decisions. So when you talk
Mm-hmm.
about get ways to get them to buy in and be part of that team, and just have that ownership over your organization, empower them so they don't micromanage them. um, giving them opportunities to grow in leadership and make decisions. You as a leader, your job is to put them in positions where they can be successful, right? You don't just like throw them in and hope they swim. But the more that you can empower them to make decisions, like nobody likes a micromanager as a boss. So as a leader, I don't know everything. I'm not a genius, but I recognize incredibly good talent and I surround myself with good people. So I empower my people to make great decisions and I don't get in there chilly. If I'm having to get in there chilly and micromanage, I made a bad decision as a leader. I have to own that and I got to find somebody else to put in that position. But that's my responsibility as a leader and I own that. So, don't micromanage, empower them to make decisions and
Yeah,
let them learn.
yeah. That's really powerful because so many times what happens is that business leaders are not focused on that. They're like, oh, they're looking at that their people are not doing the work, but it's that accountability, holding yourself accountable. It is such a powerful thing to do. So share with our listeners as to how can they connect with you and where can they find you for your book, and also like, how can we share with them the nonprofit organization that you have shared. So that would be great.
Yeah. So website is waitbehindthespear.com. So WEIGHT, waitbehindthespear.com. And the foundation, if you go to waitbehindthespear.com/foundation, that'll take you right to the foundation. And then I can be followed on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Josh McConkey MD on Instagram, and Twitter, it's McConkey, or X, it's McConkey 007.
Fantastic. Are there any other last thoughts that you'd like to share with our audience?
Yeah. What you do every day matters. Take pride in that. Even if it's the smallest thing. If you don't want to volunteer or coach, or, you're not into volunteering in schools with kids, go volunteer at your animal shelter, right? Even, you talk about every decision that you make matters. So if you even go into an animal shelter and you're helping these animals now become support animals, support pets for other individuals that help them out with their anxieties and their issues. So what you do every day matters. Just realize that and take pride in that. And, your community needs you.
Mhm. I really like that. Your community needs you. So important. So thank you, Dr. Josh, for joining us and sharing your heartfelt mission and advice and the wisdom nuggets that you have accrued over your life journey.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Honored.
Absolutely. Thank you, listeners, for joining us, because without you, the show would not be possible. And definitely, as you have heard Dr. Josh today, definitely visit his website, check it out, and see how you could support our Western North Carolina. People have gone through something, and as they predicted, that hurricane caused floods that were after 1,000 years. So lives were destroyed and a lot of impact.
Biblical level destruction. So, we need you.
So whatever support you can, we would appreciate your support, and let us know how we can support you. Who can we bring, and how can we serve you to live the best life you can? And thank you, Juan, for making the show technically possible. Be well and take care until next time.
Thank you for being part of Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. We hope you have learned more about how to start living the life you want. Each week on Beyond Confidence, you hear stories of real people who've experienced growth by overcoming their fears and building meaningful relationships. During Beyond Confidence, Divya Parekh shares what happened to her when she stepped out of her comfort zone to work directly with people across the globe. She not only coaches people how to form heart connections, but also transform relationships to mutually beneficial partnerships as they strive to live the life they want. If you are ready to live the life you want and leverage your strengths, learn more at www.divyaparekh.com. And you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. We look forward to you joining us next week.